Under Western Eyes 1911 is a novel by Joseph Conrad. The novel takes place in St. Petersburg, Russia, and Geneva, Switzerland, and is viewed as Conrad's response to the themes explored in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Conrad was reputed to have detested Dostoevsky. It has also been interpreted as Conrad's response to his own early life. His father was a Polish independence activist and would-be revolutionary imprisoned by the Russians, but, instead of following in his father's footsteps, at the age of 16 Conrad left his native land, only to return briefly decades later. 189 Indeed, while writing Under Western Eyes, Conrad suffered a weeks-long breakdown during which he conversed with the novel's characters in Polish. 244. This novel is considered to be one of Conrad's major works and is close in subject matter to The Secret Agent. It is full of cynicism and conflict about the historical failures of revolutionary movements and ideals. Conrad remarks in this book, as well as others, on the irrationality of life, the opacity of character, 3. The unfairness with which suffering is inflicted upon the innocent and poor and the careless disregard for the lives of those with whom we share existence. The book's first audience read it after the failed Russian Revolution of 1905. A later audience reading it after the Russian revolutions of 1917 perceived the author's insights differently. Writing to Edward Garnett in 1911, Conrad said, "In this book I am concerned with nothing but ideas, to the exclusion of everything else." 4. Plot Summary. Edit. Part 1. Edit. The narrator, an English teacher of languages living in Geneva, is narrating the personal record of Kyrylo Sidorovich Razumov. Razumov is a student in the University of St. Petersburg in the early 1910s. Razumov never knew his parents and has no family ties. He is trusted by his fellow students, many of whom hold revolutionary views, but Razumov takes no clear position on any of the great questions of his time because he considers all of Russia his family. A better view, perhaps, would be to say that Razumov has no family to fall back on, feels isolated from his contemporaries, takes no interest in the great issues of the day, and merely seeks a middle-class secure position within the Tsarist system. Thus, very ironically, he sees all Russia as his family. One night, Mr. Depy, the brutal minister of state, is assassinated by a team of 2, but the bombs used also claim the lives of his footman, the first assassin, and a number of bystanders. Razumov enters his rooms to find Victor Haldon, a fellow student. Haldon tells Razumov that he was the one who murdered Mr. Depy, but that he and his accomplice did not make a proper escape plan. He requests Razumov's help because he trusts him, even though he realizes that they do not quite belong in the same camp. Razumov agrees to help, if only to get Haldon out of his flat. Haldon tasks him with finding Ziemianich, who is supposed to help Haldon escape. Haldon's request launches Razumov into a deep identity crisis. He feels that his life will be destroyed by the authorities simply because of his association with Haldon. Consequently, he becomes intensely aware of his social isolation and lack of family ties. Harboring no sympathy for Haldon's actions or his ideals, Razumov is brought closer to conservatism out of the simple fear to survive. He seeks out Ziemianich and, when he finds him, drunk and incapacitated, beats him. Afterwards he makes up his mind to betray Haldon to save his own life and turns to his university sponsor, Prince K. They go to the chief of police, General T. Then a trap is laid for Haldon. Razumov returns to his apartment and attempts to explain his predicament to Haldon while concealing the fact that he has just betrayed him. Haldon leaves and, later that night, is caught. Razumov is distressed for days after Haldon's capture. In his apartment, he writes down a set of political principles which paint him as a reformist and not a revolutionary. Finally, he receives a summons to the police headquarters and meets Privy Councillor Mikulin. In a scene reminiscent of Crime and Punishment, Razumov is highly paranoid that Mikulin suspects him of being a revolutionary. Mikulin reveals that Haldon was interrogated, sentenced and hanged the same day without implicating Razumov. Mikulin also reveals that he supervised a search of Razumov's quarters and was impressed by his manifesto. Razumov attempts to leave, but Mikulin makes him pause. Part 2. The narrative shifts to Haldon's sister, Natalia, and their mother, Mrs. Haldon, who live in Switzerland after Haldon persuaded them to sell their house in Russia and move. Having lived in Zurich for a while, they then settle in Geneva, which has a vibrant Russian community. There, they wait for Haldon. Natalia has been friendly with the narrator for some time, from whom she receives English lessons. One day, the narrator chances upon the news of Haldon's arrest and execution in an English newspaper, and tells Natalia and her mother. Natalia takes the news stoically, but her mother is deeply distressed. Peter Ivanovich, a leader in the revolutionary movement, having learned of Haldan's execution, meets with Natalia and attempts to recruit her, but Natalia is skeptical and noncommittal. He also tells her that Razumov is about to arrive in Geneva, which excites Natalia, as Haldan had described him in glowing terms in his letters. Natalia is invited to the Chateau Borel, a big, neglected house that Madame de S. rents from the widow of an Italian banker, and meets Tekla, the abused companion of Madame de S. and secretary to Peter Ivanovich. Tekla recounts her life story. Afterwards, they come upon Peter Ivanovich and Razumov. Peter Ivanovich leaves and Natalia introduces herself to Razumov, who feels compassion for her. Tekla, like most of the characters whom Razumov encounters, misinterprets his taciturn cynicism, which is in fact motivated by his hatred for the entire situation he has fallen into, as the expression of a true revolutionist, and pledges her help to him, even to the point of leaving Madame de S. and Peter Ivanovich. Part 3rd. Edit. The narrative shifts back to a few weeks earlier and describes how Razumov arrived in Geneva, having first stayed in Zurich for 3 days with Sofia Antonovna, the right hand of Peter Ivanovich. Razumov did not further seek Peter Ivanovich after their first meeting, but instead took long walks with Natalia, where she took him into her confidence and asked about her brother's last hours, to which Razumov gave no definite answer. Razumov is abrasive towards the narrator, who detects a deep distress under Razumov's exterior. He is invited to the Chateau Borel, where he is received on friendly terms, as Madame de S. and Peter Ivanovich think that he was a collaborator of Haldan. In fact, Razumov has gone to Geneva, working as a spy for the Russian government. His taciturnity and reserve are interpreted by each character in their own way. The revolutionaries reveal some of their plans to Razumov, and he is given his first assignment, to bring Natalia to Peter Ivanovich so he can convert her, as Peter Ivanovich cherishes female followers above everything else. Razumov then meets Sofia Antonovna and comes to see her as his most dangerous adversary because of her single-mindedness and perception. Suppressing his distress, he manages to deceive her. Sofia Antonovna reveals that Ziemianich hanged himself soon after Haldan's execution, which makes the revolutionaries believe that he was the one who betrayed Haldan. Part 4th. The narrative shifts back to Razumov's initial interview with Mikulin. Mikulin admits having read Razumov's private notes but reassures him that he is not suspicious of him. After telling Razumov that some of the best Russian minds ultimately returned to them, referring to Dostoevsky, Gogol and Aksakov, he lets him go. Razumov spends the next few weeks in an increasing state of malaise where he alienates his fellow students and professors. In the meantime, Mikulin has received a promotion and sees an opportunity to use Razumov. He summons him to further interviews where he recruits him, with the blessings of Prince K, to act as a secret agent for the Tsarist authorities of the Russian Empire. The narrative shifts to Geneva, where Razumov is writing his first report to Mikulin. On his way to the post office, the narrator comes upon him, but Razumov takes no notice of him. The narrator goes to Natalia's flat, only to learn that Natalia must find Razumov urgently and bring him to her distraught mother, as she needs to meet the only friend of Haldan she knows. The professor and Natalia go to the Cosmopolitan Hotel to ask Peter Ivanovich where Razumov stays. There, they find the revolutionaries preparing an insurgency in the Baltic provinces. They visit Razumov's lodgings but do not find him. They then return to Natalia's quarters where Razumov has unexpectedly visited her mother. After a long conversation with Natalia in which Razumov makes several obscure and cryptic remarks, and Natalia asks how her brother spent his last hours, Razumov implies that he was the one who betrayed him. Razumov retires to his quarters where he writes his record. He explains to Natalia that he fell in love with her as soon as she took him into her confidence, that he had never been shown any kind of love before, and that he felt he had betrayed himself by betraying her brother. He mails the record to Natalia and goes to the house of Julius Laspera where a social gathering of revolutionaries is taking place. Razumov declares to the crowd that Ziemianich was innocent, and explains his motives only partially, but confesses that he was the one who betrayed Haldan. Some revolutionaries, led by Necator, attack him and smash his eardrums. A deaf Razumov is crushed by a tramcar and crippled. Tekla finds him and stays by his side at the hospital. A few months pass and Mrs. Haldan has died. Natalia has returned to Russia to devote herself to charity work after giving Razumov's record to the narrator. Tekla has taken the invalid Razumov to the Russian countryside, where she looks after him. Major characters. Edit. Kyrylo Sidorovich Razumov. Razumov is a student in the University of St. Petersburg, a hotbed of revolutionary activity at the time. He is described as a serious young man, studious and hard-working. He survives on a modest allowance provided by Prince K, his sponsor. Having known no family, he considers all of Russia his family. Handsome and aristocratic in appearance, he inspires trust in people by his obliging manner and attentive listening. His ultimate ambition before Dep's assassination was to become a professor or a privy councillor. Deeply aware of the fact that he has no meaningful connections to anyone, he relies on his hard work as a means of advancement. Razumov is held in high esteem by the Geneva revolutionaries because they think he was a collaborator of Haldun. In fact, after Haldun's arrest, Razumov is nerve-wracked and paranoid. He holds the revolutionaries in contempt and often makes sarcastic sneers, something that confuses them. He falls in love with Natalia Haldun, but having never known neither love nor family, his identity crumbles, and he finally confesses to her that he betrayed her brother. Viktor Viktorovich Haldun. A fellow student of Razumov, he assassinates Mr. Dep, but several innocent bystanders are killed as well. With his escape plan compromised, he breaks into Razumov's rooms and asks for his help. Haldun is highly idealistic but has mistaken Razumov's studiousness and thoughtfulness for trustworthiness. He does not realize that placing Razumov into an impossible situation can have unpredictable consequences for him. Haldun mentions an uncle who was executed under Nicholas I. Natalia Viktorovna Haldun. The independent-minded and sincere sister of Viktor Haldun, she is not impressed by Peter Ivanovich. She is described as full-figured, with trustful eyes. She has a confident manner and a reputation for liberalism. She was educated in an institute for women. Women were not easily allowed to study at university, where she was looked upon unfavorably. Because of her views, both mother and daughter were later placed under surveillance in their country place. Natalia thinks that by befriending Razumov, she will stay faithful to the spirit of her brother, as he had described Razumov in his letters as possessing a lofty, unstained and solitary existence. She is suspicious of the circumstances of Haldun's capture, as she thinks he would have had an escape plan. Peter Ivanovich. The bombastic leader of the revolutionaries, Ivanovich served in the Guards when he was young. He is very popular in Russia but lives in Geneva, sponsored by Madame de S, and constantly flatters her. In his autobiography, he recounts how he was imprisoned in Russia and made a dramatic escape to the Pacific coast with the help of a woman. He is considered a revolutionary feminist but regularly mistreats Tekla and is a profligate author of numerous books. In the end, Peter Ivanovich is portrayed as ineffectual, having allowed not one but two informers in his circle. When Madame de S dies, she leaves none of her fortune to Peter Ivanovich, who marries a peasant girl and moves back to Russia, but he is still deeply admired by his believers. Peter Ivanovich is mainly based on Mikhail Bakunin, while his feminist theories seem inspired from Fyodor Dostoevsky. In his Notes from the Underground, 1864 Part 2, Chapter 1, there is a reference to this name. Also in Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, 1886, there is a character with the same name, referred since the first page. There was, in addition, a Russian ambassador for the U.S., from 1817 to 1822, named Pyotr Ivanovich Politika, 1778–1849. Sofia Antonovna. The right hand of Peter Ivanovich, Antonovna is an old revolutionary who is held in high regard because she is being trusted by Peter Ivanovich with carrying out certain most important things. She is the daughter of a clever but unlucky artisan, who was brutally exploited by his masters and died at 50. She, therefore, became a revolutionary despite her youth. She is quick to see that Razumov is not particularly impressed with them. Razumov views her as the true spirit of destructive revolution, because she is devoid of the mysticism and rhetoric of Ivanovich. He makes serious efforts in deceiving her and takes pleasure when he succeeds. In the end, Antonovna admits to the narrator that she bears a grudging respect for Razumov because he confessed of his own volition and from a position of safety. Tekla. The dame de compagnie of Madame de S, Tekla was the daughter of a clerk in the finance ministry. Distressed by seeing her family living on a government salary when half of Russia was starving, she left them at a young age to live with revolutionaries where she went through great hardship. As a result, she has sustained a hatred of finance ministries and has done odd jobs for revolutionaries. She takes dictation from the psychologically abusive Ivanovich. Razumov notes that Tekla is perpetually terrified in the presence of Madame de S and Peter Ivanovich. At the end of the novel, she takes a crippled Razumov back to Russia and looks after him. It has been suggested that Conrad was influenced by the legend of Saint Thecla to create Tekla. 5. Minor characters. The narrator. A passive, obscure teacher of languages. Conrad often uses that device to elaborate his views on Russia. He wishes to advise Natalia, but because he is old and a Westerner, he feels the gap between them is too big for Natalia to listen to him. Mrs. Halden. The world-weary old mother of Victor and Natalia, she becomes suspicious when she does not receive news of Victor for some time after Mr. de P.'s assassination. After she learns of his execution, she falls ill. When she learns of Razumov, she wants to meet him. In the end of the novel, she dies. She is described as having had a fine, lucid intellect in her youth. Prince K. A Russian aristocrat and ex-guardsman who acts as Razumov's sponsor, it is also implied he is Razumov's father. Before P's assassination, Razumov had met him only once, when he was summoned to the office of an obscure attorney, and Prince K encouraged him to do well in his studies and shook his hand. He is married to an aristocratic lady, who has a temper and is rumored to beat him. Razumov turns to Prince K for help after he finds Halden in his room, having no other person to rely on. Prince K is angry at first but afterwards takes Razumov to General T, and clarifies that Razumov is not involved in revolutionary activity. Privy Councillor Gregory Grigorievich Matveevich Mikulin, the subtle head of department at the Secretariat General, he is the right hand of General T. He subjects Razumov to several interviews, successfully trying to recruit him to act as an informer for the Tsarist authorities against the revolutionaries. He does this partly for his own reasons, as he views Razumov as a tool that he can use after he receives a promotion to general supervisor over European operations. A hedonistic and greatly influential official. He meets his end a few years after the events of the novel as the consequence of a state trial. General T, modeled after Fyodor Trepov, General T is a high official in the Secretariat General of the Ministry of Interior of the Police Secretariat, to whom Razumov betrays Halden's escape plan. General T is initially suspicious of Razumov, but his mind is set at ease by Prince K, who vouches for Razumov's character. He believes that the structure of society is based on fidelity to institutions, and he has a deep hatred of revolutionaries that he describes as natural. Mr. Depp, the brutal and repressive minister of state in the Tsarist government. Fanatical and single-minded, he imprisoned, exiled or condemned to execution revolutionaries of every age and gender. He does not believe in liberty and justifies this using religion. He is assassinated by Halden in a scene based on the real-life assassination of Vyacheslav von Plehev. Baroness Eleonora Maximovna de S., the pretentious widow of a Russian diplomat, she left Russia some years before the events of the novel because she was suspected of having had foreknowledge of the assassination of Alexander II of Russia. She is an ardent believer in Ivanovich and met him when he was serving in the Guards as a young man, and she supports him financially in Geneva. Razumov describes her as looking like a galvanized corpse. She is described as greedy, avaricious and unscrupulous by the narrator. Nikita Nekitor. A brutal revolutionary assassin, Nekitor is responsible for numerous murders and has a fearsome reputation. Fat to the point of obesity, he is greatly excited by violence. He cripples Razumov near the end of the novel by smashing his eardrums. In the end, Councillor Mikulin informs Ivanovich in a chance meeting in Russia that Nekitor had been a double agent all along, providing information to the Russian authorities. Razumov was apparently aware of this as he taunted Nekitor before he was attacked. He bears many similarities to the historical double agent Yevno Azev.